Hello and welcome again to another YouTube conversation, and we're delighted today to have with us Philip Lymbery, who amongst many other roles is the Global Chief Executive Officer of Compassion in World Farming, and we'll be talking to him about that and a number of other aspects of the work that he does for animal welfare. So welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much, Gerald. It's a real pleasure to be here.
And as I intimated there, I mean, you are in animal welfare, animal advocacy, a man of many hats. You have a number of different roles and organisations which you're involved in. Compassion in World Farming and Eurogroup and various offshoots of that. You've also got an academic aspect to your work, and an author as well of two, soon to be 3 books. Which is, you know, I mean, just wondering, you know, kind of how do you manage to pack this all in? You know, must be rather difficult getting all those into the hours of the day.
Well, it's certainly exciting, Gerald, I have to say, and it's wonderful to work with so many people in so many guises. And of course, I know Chris from both my Compassion hat and Eurogroup for Animals. And Chris Fegan, of course, is a brilliant advocate for animals, and always enjoy our conversations together and the work that our organisations do together. But, you know, Gerald, I think it's I've been around for a while now. You know, I've been in and around Compassion in World Farming for 31 years. Mm-hmm. I've been chief executive for 16 years. Before that, you know, I guess my involvement in animal issues dates right back into the middle 80s, professionally from 1990. And so, yeah, I've got to the point in my career where things have just mushroomed. You know, the visiting professor at the University of Winchester, which I'm so proud of, as I left school with very few qualifications. So being a visiting professor is particularly good. But the reason why I left with so few qualifications and why I didn't go to university, actually, Gerald, was because I wanted to pursue a career in animals. I was particularly fascinated by wildlife, and I ended up being a long-term volunteer for the RSPB on a nature reserve. And then I got bitten by the animal welfare bug and never looked back, really. So, you know, it's great to be involved in Compassion in World Farming. It's great to be, and a huge privilege to be president of Eurogroup for Animals. And I was also so pleased that we've been able to give birth to a new organisation in the last few months, the World Federation for Animals, and you know, working with Britta Rees and Reineke Hamliers and others that have been at the centre of this new thing. It really feels like animal welfare is going to the next level, and I'm just so delighted to be a part of it, and so delighted that Catholic Concern for Animals is also part of this growing family of organisations and people concerned about animals.
I mean, you covered essentially everything we want to talk about there, Philip, but let's unpack some of that. Compassion in World Farming, I mean, with you at the head of Compassion in World Farming, you're now billed as the Global Chief Executive Officer, and I think it's fair to say that Compassion in World Farming's international footprint has grown over the years. I mean, you know, I'm tempted to say, I mean, can you give us any tips? Because we'd like to go there as well. But how important do you think that is to the work that you're doing?
I think it's essential because, of course, animal cruelty and concern for animals knows no boundaries, certainly no geographical boundaries. And so we deal, what happens in one country affects animals in another country. So that is why I've had it as a really big part of my mandate, my agenda since I took over as CEO 16 years ago, to internationalize the organization. And we now have offices and personnel in 12 countries on 4 continents. So we're working in China, in South Africa, across the European Union, our headquarters in the UK. We've got a thriving office in the US, and we've got plans for more. But you know, if you go back to the early days when I started at Compassionate World Farming, I started in 1990 as an assistant. I went for an officer job, a campaigns officer job, and I was interviewed by the founder, Peter Roberts, an ex-dairy farmer, and I was absolutely distraught to hear when I got the phone call to hear that I didn't get the job, because I didn't have the experience. I'd never been a professional animal welfare person before. But in the next breath, having told me I didn't get the job, I was told that he'd created a new role, should I want it, of assistant. And remember, this was a small organization then, 10 people in an office above a health food shop, the Brand Tub. And that was it. There was no other offices in other countries or any other parts of the world. Did I want this assistant job? And goodness, if I could have climbed down the phone then and hugged him, I would have done. So yes was the answer. And I pitched up in May. The boy from Bedfordshire, from near Luton, turns up in Petersfield in Hampshire in May 1990, and I've never looked back since. And you know, whilst our founder has passed away sadly in 2006, I do feel that those early years of working with him have given me that foundational insight to continue his legacy, to expand out that legacy, and to help not only Compassion, but I would like to think through my other roles, the wider animal welfare movement, to see treatment of animals, compassion for animals in the context of that bigger picture, that really to protect people, we have to protect animals too. And that is so fundamental, to see that nature friendly and welfare friendly go together like that. And that actually the very best animal welfare is when you are farming, for example, in a nature-friendly way. So all of these things, these big picture things knit together. The fact that factory farming is not only the biggest issue of animal cruelty on the planet, it's also a major driver of wildlife declines. It's also a big reason why we can't feed everyone properly on the planet. Nearly a billion people go to bed hungry every night, and that's a figure that has been static or growing again. So 820 million, so getting on for 1 billion people out of the 8 billion that we have, which is a terrible legacy. But what we should remember is that in factory farming, we've taken animals out of the fields, the woodland edges, where they would find their own food. And we've put them in cages and crates, which looks like a space-saving idea, but actually isn't, because we then have to grow their feed, their food elsewhere on scarce arable land that could be feeding people. And if you put all of that arable land together, all of that feed that is fed to industrially reared animals together, then what you would find is it could be feeding 4 billion people. That's enough food wasted through factory farming to feed half of humanity today. That is a shocking indictment. And that is why, for animals' sake, for people's sake, for the planet's sake, we have got to end factory farming now.
That message of the intrinsic link between humanity and nature, it certainly resonates with our organisation and Laudato Si, Pope Francis encyclical, and is something which we're very keen to show, because I think, like you say, it is it's become now a question of actually survival, not just of other animals, but of us as a species, in terms of the way in which we are behaving towards nature. And I think that's very important. And thank you for highlighting that. I mean, how is Compassion in World Farming achieving this? I mean, because one of the things which, of course, makes your work extremely difficult, I would have thought, is the international legal structure and trade structure. For example, this country has recently come out of the European Union, negotiating things like the new Australian trade deal, which has been much hyped, and that must make an ever-changing kaleidoscope of events which you have to follow and react to.
It's a very, very complicated picture, Gerald, but and yes, you know, it means that we're constantly fighting on all fronts. We're constantly up against progress made here being undermined over there by the latest, you know, trade negotiation or what have you. But I think that we have to remember that all the time the stakes are stacking in our favour. In that the world is a finite place, yet we continue to mine it, to use its resources, its animals, its environment, as if it's an infinite place. That whole idea, for example, that, you know, we've got an economic system that is based on infinite growth on a finite planet. It just doesn't stack up. And so what people are beginning to see, and no more so than since the pandemic, is that there are things that are really joined together, that these things are interconnected. People can see that at what seemed like an invincible way of life can be snatched away from us in a heartbeat, in that at any moment we could be told that we can't leave our homes, we can't meet our families, we can't hug our friends, let alone go abroad for our holidays. So people are realizing that there are now limits, and those limits are coming in and in. And you know, if you want, I can build out on that very briefly. And that, you know, my view is that we've got years, at best decades, to turn around a tanker that is heading for a collision course with oblivion, really. Scientists tell us that we've got 10 years now to implement deep enough to solve climate change. That's not to work out what to do, it's to actually get it going. At the same time, pollinating insects, bees and the like, that are essential for the very existence of a third of our food are falling off a cliff. Antibiotics are 73% of which we feed to farmed animals, mainly to ward off the diseases inevitable with factory farming. Antibiotics are now becoming increasingly useless due to drug resistance, to the point where the World Health Organization tells us that currently treatable diseases could once again kill. At the same time, if we look to our oceans to feed us, as the land becomes less able to, that's not going to work, because we've got decades left before we run out of fish. And then there's the soil on which our agriculture, our farming, our food is founded. And the UN warns that if we carry on as we are with industrial style agriculture, we've got just 60 harvests left, 60 years left in the world's soils before that's the end of the food system. And of course, that's that's a projection. It's a doomsday projection. But the problem with running out of soil or any of these other things is that when you've got 8-9 billion people to feed on a planet, the jeopardy kicks in well before you get to point zero, well before the temperature gets to a certain point or the soils completely disappear. That's when you get the jeopardy, you get the food crisis, and with food crisis comes huge insecurity, becomes tensions, becomes war. And that is why in my next book, 60 Harvests Left, From Farmageddon to a Nature-Friendly Future, I paint a picture what I think is a very real threat, that if we carry on as we are, then we are undoubtedly going to leave an impoverished future, if a future at all, for our children. And that is why we need big change. As the UN Secretary General has said, we need to transform the food system if we are to have any hope of handing over a decent future to generations to come. And that is why I am so pleased that Catholic Concern for Animals, that the Catholic community is interested in these issues and is getting behind these issues, because big change needs big constituencies, big voices to get behind and say enough is enough. If we really value the future for our children, then we've got to do the right thing. And the sweet spot here, Gerald, the very beautiful thing is we can have it all, because a future for our children means a better, more compassionate future for animals, a better, more respectful way of embracing the environment, bringing all of these things together that compassionate, thoughtful, nature-loving, animal-loving people everywhere will want to embrace. Bring them all together, and that will provide us with a very beautiful future and a way to overcome what otherwise could be the Farmageddon scenario.
I think, I mean, just to comment on what you've just said, I mean, one of the things I think which people often don't associate with our relationship with the environment, with nature, is the kind of leads and lags involved. You know, the fact that altering, for example, our pollution now will have no effect on climate change for the next 20, 30 years, because the pollution that we are creating, have created for the last 20, 30 years, has still got to have its impact. And similarly, in order to preserve the soil that we've got, we need to do that, to plan for that ahead of the game, and to plan for how we're going to change things, because it's going to be very difficult to manage that change, particularly in a kind of global environment, in an international environment. And I think that's something which I mean, very few people actually really come to, and I think as well, I mean, there are lots of people in animal advocacy and animal welfare who would agree with you about, you know, the fact that if we do the right things, it'll benefit us, it'll benefit the environment, it'll benefit everything. It's so, for many people, crystal clear the thing to be done, that it's absolutely amazing to them that it's not being done. And that we haven't organised society in order to achieve this, but yet we still have these battles to have, and you in Compassion in World Farming, you're right at the forefront of that with respect to the work that you do with the food industry and with food businesses. I mean, that must be a very interesting kind of like cultural disconnect in terms of going and talking to some of these food companies and where they're coming from with their attitudes to animals and to nature.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it is. It has felt like a clash of ideologies, two worlds, for many years. But the great thing, Gerald, is that I think that there is a real awakening going on inside many companies as well as governments. We've been working very closely with corporations, big and small, for about the last 15 years. And over the last few years, since we've been measuring our animal impact, over about the last 8 years or so, we've worked out that the impact of the commitments to better animal welfare practice made by more than 1,000 companies that we've worked with across the world adds up to more than 2 billion animals a year living better lives. So I do think that there is a real awakening that animal welfare is good for the animals, of course, also good for the company's brand, for the company's heritage, for their consumers, and so on and so forth. And I do think there is also now a new wave of realization going on. You know, for example, one of the surprising awards that we gave was an innovation award recently to McDonald's, that is looking at regenerative agriculture which is nature friendly, that does have the potential to deliver some of the best animal welfare. And the great thing about working with McDonald's is that they're so huge that they can scale these things up. You know, if they've got a solution, they can scale them up. And I do find myself a little bit a little bit in a dilemma when talking about big companies like McDonald's. We'll keep going with this story because, I started out in the 1980s as a McDonald's protester outside their stores because of all the things that was going on and what have you. And I think that that helped the company to wake up to what needed to change and to become a leading light for change in many respects. And it's come to the point where, now I'm often, I go around the world, I go around this country, and people say to me, oh, it's all very well, this animal welfare stuff, but, it's going to push up food prices, and, animal welfare is just for middle-class people who can afford it. And do you know what I say to them, particularly abroad? I say, look, why don't you come to my country, to England? I will take you to a restaurant where the eggs are free range, where the beef comes from cows that are kept on pasture, where the milk for the hot drinks is organic, where the pork is RSPCA assured and the fish are MSC certified. I'll take you to McDonald's. If they can do it on a pound saver menu, then anyone can do it. Animal welfare does not need to be the domain of the middle class, well-heeled. But also, I think, not only is that a practical lesson, I think we also have to fight back against this idea that people on low incomes should have to feed their children on rubbish food from factory farms. Why is that ever something which is, in any shape or form acceptable to say? What I believe very, very, very much is that not only can higher welfare, environmentally friendly food be affordable, it's actually affordable, decent food should be a human right. Shouldn't be something which we have to afford through having a decent job. It should be a basic human right. And the way that governments can create that is through redirecting subsidies. At the moment, £3 billion worth of subsidies go towards agriculture in Britain. A lot of it encouraging intensification, industrialization, bad stuff for the environment, bad stuff for animals. Redirect that to make regenerative, nature-friendly farming more viable, more encouraged. And great thing is that's on the government's agenda with public money for public goods. The other thing is, let's have a meat tax. Let's tax factory farmed meat, i.e. the cheap, nasty, bad stuff that's causing the pollution, the climate change, the cruelty, and so on and so forth. Let's tax that, not so that that tax revenue goes into government pockets, but so that it's used to offset the cost of decent food, be it fruit, vegetables, or higher welfare meat, dairy, and eggs. And in this way, we make decent food more affordable for everyone as a basic human right.
It's interesting, actually, you were saying about kind of like, arguments about organic food, good quality food being a middle class issue. I mean, in my former life as an academic, I remember reading some of the politics research which was arguing this kind of stuff with respect to party policy, which kind of leads into your kind of academic career at the University of Winchester. So what's all that about? You've got the centre at the University of Winchester. What does that do, and how do you feed into that?
Well, there is a Centre for Animal Welfare at the University of Winchester that's run by the most brilliant academic, Professor Andrew Knight. He has a team of like-minded academics that are developing science and positioning papers that help to develop themes around animal welfare, and also themes around reducing meat consumption, which I think is a key component of the future for all of us, is that rebalancing of diets. And one of the things I know that he's been working on, I hope you won't mind me saying, is looking at actually meat-free meals for pets, for cats and dogs, and showing the viability of this, because of course about 20–25% of meat consumption is in feeding our pets. So they're doing fantastic work there, and I feel really privileged to be able to support them through my role as visiting professor at the University of Winchester, and I show up occasionally and I don a gown, and I'm pleased to give them a lecture on some of these issues, and hopefully inspire some of the up and coming academics to really embrace this field for the future. But also it helps me, to be honest, when I'm going around the world, be it in China, South Africa, or the US, to be able to talk not only as the global chief executive of compassionate world farming, but also to have this academic backing as well. So it's all good, it's all self-supporting, and it's all part of what I believe in, which is a community. That's as Chris knows, I very much believe in the community of the animal welfare movement, that we're so much stronger together in whatever sense that togetherness takes, whether it's taking that credibility from the University of Winchester when I'm doing a talk on my own, or whether that is 70 member societies all signing on to the same letter, or whatever it takes. And I think that biggest is probably the biggest example of that togetherness. There's been a recent breakthrough in the European Union, which is that we brought 170 organizations together behind a campaign to end the cage age in Europe. And this was an ambitious new thing. Up until then, we've been talking much more in silos, in segments, in trying to go at the next weak link in the industrial agricultural chain. So we've been going for cages for hens or whatever specific it is, but we wanted this End the Cage Age campaign, which called for an end to the use of all cages in animals farmed for food across the whole European Union. We've got 170 organizations together. We've got more than 1.3 million signatures on a legislatively binding petition site run by the European Commission, which obliged the Commission to take it seriously, which obligated the European Parliament to take a vote. And the boil down from that is that the European Parliament did take a vote, and 37 votes against ending the cage age were outweighed by 558 votes in favour of ending all cages. But then it got better. 2 weeks later, it got so much better in that the European Commission, the European Commissioner herself, Stella Kyriakides, stood behind a podium with the TV screens on her. And I tell you, the script could not have been written better than Hollywood. She stood there and she pronounced that she was going to legislate to end all cages of farmed animals in Europe, and that they would be gone by 2027. Now we have some process to do to get there, but honestly, that is the power of working together. That is the power of ambition. That is the power of compassionate people everywhere, joining hands and making it happen.
And of course, that statement by the EU, which was a very powerful statement, was taken live at a Eurogroup meeting, which you were present at, and I was present at, Philip. I mean, that was an amazing event for Eurogroup, who had been such a big part of organising the End the Cage Age movement.
Absolutely, yeah. The timing couldn't have been better. It was slap bang in the middle of our annual general meeting, and to have been the chair of that AGM with the wonderful people attending that had been part and parcel of making that extraordinary event happen. It was just the best day ever in my entire career for animals. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I'm so glad, Gerald, you were there.
Yeah, I was glad I was there as well. It was some AGM, because not only did, of course, we have that statement occupying the middle of events, but we also had the creation of the WFA. And how important is that for the future of the movement, do you think, Phil?
Well, I think it's huge. I think the World Federation for Animals is really going to help take animal welfare to the next level on the global stage. You know, one of the big holes in our game has been a focused, consistent voice for animals at the intergovernmental level. You know, we've often been working at the local level, at the national level, you know, often working with different stakeholder groups, be they corporate or faith-based groups or whatever those denominations are. But the missing strata has been that overarching intergovernmental level. You know, of course, organizations like Compassion and World Farming, we do nibble away at the UN, but having an organization that brings us all together and is consistently focused, is set up to focus on influencing that intergovernmental level, I think is a huge development, a huge benefit for us. Yeah,
it's interesting how, you know, again, I mean, going back to my politics days, I mean, one of the things that we used to talk about in the politics of the European Union was the creation of umbrella groups, the European Union, of which the Eurogroup would be one. And now, you know, this kind of like movement onto the global stage with groups like the World Federation for Animals. And that is important in terms of changing the perspective, in being able to coordinate and bring together groups like ours and CIWF and loads of other groups in common movement towards particular selected aims. But of course, it also presents challenges in terms of actually having something which is meaningful, and because, I mean, one of the things you said earlier about all the different diversity in animal advocacy, which I think is absolutely great, and I think it's really good to see the increasing willingness to embrace that diversity and accept people coming from different perspectives who still want to improve the lives of animals, who want to improve our relationship with nature, want to improve the world and the way we take it forward, and you know, the increasing acceptance of that. But it does bring problems in terms of actually still making that meaningful in terms of going forward, you know, finding the commonalities where we can actually make a difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are always challenges when you're trying to find a common position, but one of the things which I've noticed in the animal community, certainly in Europe, is that in Europe and America, is that there is a growing confidence that's born out of greater success and impact, a growing ambition, and a growing willingness to come together and accept that, you know, we don't have to agree with every you know, dotted I or crossed T, that buying into the broad sense of the proposition is really what's important here. So I do feel that this is the best time for animal organizations coming together, because I do feel that organizations are much more willing to trust each other, really.
Yeah.
To trust that a broad position, you know, with some rough edges, that has ambition and is put forward in good faith together, is much better than something that is that is tightly crafted. I'm trying to avoid the word carefully crafted, but crafted, you know, within an inch of its life, that no one is quite happy with, and that represents a lowest common denominator. So I do feel that there is a much greater sense of, you know, willingness to sign up to things, even if they aren't exactly as we would like them, but we can see the broad sense and ambition.
How effective do you feel Eurogroup has been in taking its aims forward, and what are your hopes for the WFA going into the future?
Well, I think Eurogroup has been hugely successful. The thing about Eurogroup is it doesn't work in isolation. It is, essentially the Brussels-based lobby group that ties together the work of 70 diverse member organizations in the 27 member states of the European Union, plus the independent European outlier of the UK. And so it's tying together all of those, all of that effort and making it count in Brussels, in the decision-making heart of Europe. And I think it's been crucial because having a credible, focused office full of lobbyists who know good terms with commissioners, with MEPs and what have you, and have got the process on tap and have got that long established track record, I think is a huge benefit, a huge resource to all of us as an animal welfare community. And I think what I've noticed is, as we've created the World Federation, to take on the second part of your question, is that actually Eurogroup for Animals is probably the best example of a regional umbrella body for animals. And that what we're looking to do with the World Federation is essentially to take the lessons learned from Eurogroup on a regional level and apply them on the global level. But more than that, in applying those lessons learned, we're also looking to encourage other Eurogroups in other parts of the world, obviously not called Eurogroup, but a South American regional umbrella, an African regional umbrella, and so forth, that is as well organized, as focused, as resourceful for the movement, a resource for the movement, a repository, a powerhouse of focus. And in that way, we not only build up to that intergovernmental level with an umbrella group, but we also build out, build strength in other regions of the planet. So I think it's a hugely exciting time.
Chris, you've been a player in this as well. Have you got any comments about what Philip's been saying?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's already been a fascinating conversation, and in some ways, reluctant to come in and stop the flow by putting in my little bit. But I mean, all that Philip has said chimes very, very resonantly with myself, in that I can't think of anything that he has said which I would disagree with at all. But that's not unusual. We very rarely do Philip and I disagree. I'm delighted that we work closely as organisations and individuals together, and have done for some time. And I think part of that is the global viewpoint that both Philip and I share, and our organisation share, because of course Catholic Concern for Animals is a global organisation, and we actually work on every continent, theoretically, because even in Antarctica, there's probably some Catholics working on an Antarctic research station somewhere. So, although they may not get my emails very often, but because obviously there are Catholics in every part of the globe, and our remit is to reach those individuals as well as the organisation of the church, to try and spread our educational message. So this global viewpoint, this global idea, sits very, very well with us. And I'm delighted that, and I've thanked Philip before, and I'll thank him again for his part in when Catholic Concern for Animals originally joined, or applied to join, should I say, Eurogroup. He was very supportive at that time to us, and I've always thanked him for that, and I'll thank him again now. And of course, we've also joined the World Federation for Animals, and again, that I totally agree with his vision for that. And I also totally agree that Eurogroup for Animals is the template and the great work that is done in Brussels by the staff of Eurogroups, not only the member organisation. I think Eurogroup is very, very lucky with the staff it has in Brussels. Absolutely first-rate one and all there. So if the World Federation for Animals can replicate what's done in Brussels, they'll be onto a winner, I'm sure. And so I'm talking about organisation and process, but obviously the issues are the same as well. Going back to the process a little bit, we're also members of Asia for Animals, for example, at CCA. We've worked with FIAPO in India, and all these sort of organisations that are all working to the same ends that Philip has described, of a better life for animals. And just going back to one issue before I turn to the UN, because I want to just have a quick chat about the UN, but just on the issue of lockdown and how we've been working. We're actually due, I don't know if you know this, Philip, you may not, we're actually due to do our first post-lockdown face-to-face event. It's a national conference of something called the National Justice and Peace Network in the UK. And they got their annual conference, which of course they couldn't have last year, and they're now, fingers crossed, it will take place at the end of July. And we are presenting on animal welfare, industrial farming and biodiversity loss, all issues you've written about, of course. And I will be pointing them in the direction of your books whilst I'm giving that workshop. So it's all these things that we do together, and it's very, very similar agenda in many, many ways that Compassion and CCA work on. I just want to come back, if I may, to the UN, because we've talked about the global picture and the World Federation for Animals. And I know you've got another one of your hats, a new hat, relatively new hat, which is with the UN. And I think it's food champion. I'm not sure if I got that correct, food champion for the UN Food Systems Summit. I just wanted to ask about that. I'm still, last I heard, it's still taking place later this year, but I was unsure where we are regarding if that's going to be a face-to-face in the United States, or it's going to be a virtual event. And if you could just maybe answer that question for me, it'll be helpful, but also talk a bit about that food summit, which I think is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, Chris. And you know, it's always been a pleasure, always is a pleasure to work with you on these common issues, and great that CCA is so involved at European and global level. It really is. And with the UN, yes, I was privileged to be given to be asked to join a network of UN Food Systems Summit champions, so UN Food Champion. So it's an ambassadorial role in the run-up to the UN Food Systems Summit, which is due to take place in New York in the autumn, in September. There is a pre-summit that's happening later this month, at the end of this month, in Rome. The pre-summit will be happening pretty much as an online event. It's yet to be decided exactly whether New York is going to be a physical or a hybrid or a purely online event. And I think COVID will probably have a say in that. So a little bit too early to say for sure. But what I would say is that, you know, the UN Food Systems Summit, what's really good about it, what no one can take away from it, whatever the outcome, is that it has mainstreamed the idea that we need to transform food systems. Up until recently, up until the UN Secretary General made that statement that we need to transform we need to transform food systems. Up until that point, there was very much a feeling globally that, you know, tinkering was good enough, or, you know, or actually, why do we need to change things because the status quo is good enough? You know, I think Chris, Gerald, the three of us have worked in a paradigm era where there has been an unyielding status quo, and we've had to bash away very hard with our advocacy to get any change whatsoever. But now the language has changed towards a language of transformation, and that is a very precious thing. What transformation actually means, Well, that's still to be defined, and that's where we come in as the animal community, in helping to shape that, to make sure that we make that connection, that protecting people and the future for people means protecting animals and the environment too. So that to me is what food systems transformation means. And to put no final point on it, what is very clear is that if the agenda is to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, those lofty UN goals signed up to by the world's governments coming, which conclude in 2030. If we're going to achieve those, then we need to transform our food system. The UN Secretary General says that. What kind of transformation do we need? Well, my analysis is that without moving away from factory farming and without reducing the global consumption level of animal sourced foods, then many of the SDGs, if not all, will remain well out of reach.
Yeah, thank you for that, Philip. That helps me with a bit, at least a bit of my planning for the year, because I think this year is extremely interesting because we've talked about the food system summit. Of course, we've got the COVID pandemic, so still unsure of everything that's happening, but we've got a plan for the UN Food System Summit. We've got COP26, of course, on climate change, and we've got COP15 on biodiversity. Three huge events in a matter of months together. So very, very challenging to get all those huge events up and running, especially in the current world scenario of the pandemic, but also very exciting as well. And obviously CCA wish to play their part as much as we can in all of those events. And so it's very exciting and although of course always challenging times. But I think you're right about this breakthrough that has come after decades and decades of work. I mean, CCA has been around in one form or other since 1929, and suddenly people before us have worked very hard trying to get the church involved in animal welfare, trying to get the individual members of the faith involved, and of course a lot of our global reach we've now got through the internet. Of course, 20-30 years ago we wouldn't have reached those people in Antarctica, yet alone anywhere else. But now with the power of the internet, of course, we can, a click of an email, communicate with somebody. And just on that point, and then I'll hand back to Gerald, is that it's our 50th anniversary of our colleagues in Australia. They formed their CCA branch in 1971, and we're enjoying celebrating that with our colleagues there. And going back to the connection with Eurogroup, we're very, very pleased to sign the letter to the UEFA football man, president, or whatever role they think is president, regarding the use of kangaroo leather football boots at the recent event. So it shows how the world is all interconnected. And of course, in some ways, what we're doing now via the miracles of technology have made the animal advocacy world stronger, because we can communicate with so many more people wherever they're living, which is a great boon, certainly for CCA, and I think for all of us.
I absolutely agree. Well, congratulations to CCA in Australia. That's fantastic, a wonderful milestone. And goodness, I should have known that CCA has been going for as long as that. But hats off. What a fantastic pioneering organization, making the case for a decent life for all animals. And I think you're absolutely right that the internet has given us incredible access, incredible connectivity. What it's also done is actually made mainstream media sit up much more and cover animal issues. Before, it was a hard job to get animal issues in the papers at all, really. It was a real hard job. But now the fact that we can publish them ourselves has not only given our issues much greater prominence through our own efforts, but I think has also pushed mainstream media to be much more imaginative and open to the kind of stories that it covers. Not enough, not enough by any means, but more than they were, which I think is a good sign.
Can I ask you, firstly, I mean, congratulations to you on another book coming out in the not too distant future, Philip. Presumably be on the shelves in time for Christmas, and we can all go out and buy it and have a read over Christmas, and think about what we're eating then as well. But I don't talk about it because there's Farmageddon that you wrote with Isabel Oakeshott, Dead Zone, and now 60 Harvests. Is it the new book?
60 Harvests Left, yes. 60
Harvests Left. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, one of the major themes that's dominated your approach to all this has been the way we need to address the way we produce the food we eat and how that needs to change. So with that, with respect to that, I mean, what do you think? I mean, you've touched on bits of it, but what do you think needs to change? How does our agriculture, how does our management of food, our management of our relationship to nature in the case of production of food, how does that need to change for this better future for us to arise?
Well, thank you, Gerald. And well, to give you the answer to that really is if I preview for you the sort of solutions section of the book. So 60 Harvests Left, from Farmageddon to a nature-friendly future. So how do we get from where we're inevitably going to crash land if we carry on to something better? Well, the answer is regeneration of the countryside, rethinking our proteins, and rewilding. Those three things. What do I mean by that? Regeneration of the countryside means moving away from factory farming, from industrial agriculture, where animals are caged, crammed and confined, and where their food is grown in pesticide-soaked monocultures. That means that wildlife is wiped away. Move away from that and instead reintroduce the animals back to the land as part of mixed farming scenarios where your cattle and sheep are grazing pastures, where they're moving in harmony with the crops, where they're being followed by pigs and chickens in this beautiful, better than free range kind of scenario, which helps to bring biodiversity back, bring back the soil health, and creates better quality food. So that's regenerating the countryside, which is so urgently needed. The second is rethinking protein, so diversifying our proteins. So not just thinking of protein in terms of animal-sourced foods, but also thinking in terms of more plant-based, about cell-based, so cultured meat, from stem cells grown in a bioreactor, also to fermentation and precision fermentation, where microbes are programmed to produce precise molecules, protein molecules. So essentially, if you know the DNA profile of a particular protein, you can get these microbes to produce that exact protein. In this way, you can even produce food that is essentially the DNA makeup of extinct species. So you could have a woolly mammoth burger, but without killing a woolly mammoth, because, well, they don't exist anyway. And these, I say that really to sort of catch the attention of what this, the power of these coming technologies. But rethinking protein gives us the opportunity, Gerald, to bring forth the renewable energy of food. Because one thing we do need is we need to regenerate farming. So we need regenerative agriculture, but we also need to rebalance our diets. We are globally, as a global community, eating too much meat, dairy and eggs. And if I had to put a figure on how much meat reduction should be, in the UK and Europe, it needs to reduce by somewhere in the region of 2/3 to 70%, which is quite a lot. And if you think about that in energy terms, well, if you said to people, well, we want you to reduce your energy consumption by 70%, which means that 7 nights out of 10, you're going to have to light your home using candles. That wouldn't go down very well, would it? And I'm not suggesting that non-meat alternatives are quite like candles, but the thing is, of renewable energy, it means that people can reduce their energy consumption, certainly their fossil fuel energy consumption, without even knowing it, by having something which comes through the same socket, be it solar power or wind power, comes through the same socket, just as convenient and costs the same or is cheaper. Well, the great thing about cultured meat from cell-based production or fermentation or the new wave of plant-based foods is that we'll get to the point where people won't know the difference between that and meat from animals. So that's a real accelerator in reducing meat consumption. And the third, so we talked about regeneration, we talked about rethinking protein, so more plant-based, cell-based fermentation. The third R is rewilding. And the great thing about this is not just the wonderful, eye-catching rewilding of beavers and wolves and all these other things, but rewilding the soil. The biggest frontier, the biggest opportunity for rewilding is the soil. 8 billion, every handful of healthy soil has 8 billion creatures in it. That's as many creatures in it in just a handful of soil as the entire global human population of today. So it's incredible. But the trouble is that so much of our soil now is so impoverished that there's next to nothing in there. But so that's why I think we need to rewild the soil. We need to bring back the elephant. Bring back the elephant to Britain, to Europe, to America and elsewhere. And by that, and here's where you're thinking, oh, he's lost a part. But I don't mean elephants with trunks and flappy ears. What I mean is the elephant's weight of biodiversity that should be living in every football-sized pitch of healthy soil if we were to do things right. And what does doing things right? And here's a circularity. Doing things right means getting animals back on the land, getting farm animals back out there so that they're moving in mixed rotations, their manure is fertilizing the soil naturally, that we're not using heavy plowing, that we're not using heavy chemicals, that we're allowing the countryside to live, we're allowing the soil to rebuild, we're allowing biodiversity to rebuild, and we're giving farmed animals a decent life where we respect them as sentient beings that not only are free from suffering, but free to enjoy the wonderful experience of life, that joy of life, which we all want. So regenerate the countryside, rethink our protein and reduce the amount of animal source foods, and rewild the countryside too, not least the soil, by letting those animals back out of those cages and crates, back on the ground, fewer of them, kept better. This is the way that we not only have a thriving countryside, but we have better food, animals treated better, and a future for our children, which to me sounds like a brilliant manifesto, be it for the Catholic community or anyone else.
I have to say, I mean, your mention of woolly mammoth burgers and the idea of kind of like T-Rex steaks came to mind as well. I can see a whole new isle in Iceland growing up around this. It's but one of the things which kind of like certainly struck me is that, of course, I live in an area which is surrounded by forest, which is all you managed forestry commission forest, and doesn't contain the same biodiversity as the remnants, the little patches of the old deciduous forest, the old broadleaf forests that used to exist here before we cleared them all for farming and for production of food. And I think that certainly getting back to expanding those areas, I mean, of course we will never see the same biodiversity in our lifetime, but expanding them and giving a chance for that biodiversity to regrow, I think is certainly an appealing vision from my perspective. Can I end on a kind of like slightly more controversial question? I mean, part of there are all kinds of groups now who are looking at this in different ways. I mean, you mentioned that you know, businesses are beginning to kind of get the message that they really need to change. And on the one hand, you know, groups like ours, like yourselves and like CCA, have engaged with Eurogroup, with the UN, the European Union, with the places where things get done. And then you have other groups, I mean, maybe more like Extinction Rebellion, which have rejected all that and said that that's all needs to be swept away, and we need something, you need to reject this kind of liberal establishment vision. Are there dangers going forward in terms of on the one hand, groups like ours, which have essentially the same objectives as the more activist groups, that those having a disconnect, losing connection, not being able to take the message forward across, I think, the broad face that we need to?
I do think that we're an ecosystem of organisations and approaches, and the thing I love about Extinction Rebellion is their framing. The framing of the issues is that, you know, it's big picture, it's all connected, and it's very simple. That, you know, much as I've been saying, really, that,
yeah,
you know, if we don't tackle climate change head on and nature, the collapse of nature, as well as the pandemic emergency now, then, you know, that's going to affect all of us for generations to come, and we're likely to see our society go in ever decreasing circles. And I think that it's horses for courses in terms of you know, whether people feel that their approach is a more activist bent, or whether the approach is more to get into rooms, get into dialogue, and to make the changes happen, to bring those changes in for a landing. And Compassion in World Farming, CCA, Eurogroup for Animals, the World Federation for Animals, our role is two things. One, to bring the voice of civil society to bear, so that policymakers, be they politicians or companies, know that there is a strong voice for animals that out there and that things need to be done. And the other thing is to get into the room with those same politicians, those same companies, and say, look, you know, something needs to change. We're here to encourage you to make it. We can help you make it. Here's what needs to be done. So I think that you know, that there is room for a broad church. I think we just need to avoid bringing movements into disrepute. As long as we avoid doing that, then I think that the ecosystem continues to be, you know, a viable, vibrant, and forward-looking vehicle in which we can all play our parts. So again, it comes back to that togetherness, Gerald, which I know that you and Chris and CCA believe in so much, and that's very much my vision, is that through being together we are so much stronger and can therefore advocate for that big picture change for animals, and at the same time we can pick off those more incremental wins as we go along towards this fantastic journey. You talked about bringing the biodiversity back. Yeah, what a fantastic journey. We may not see it as it was, as it should be in our lifetimes, but boy, every time I see something new that wasn't there before, I think, my goodness, you know, my birthdays have come at once. And, you know, I'm sure that many of us feel that way. And each time we get a new victory for animals, fantastic. How good can things get? Well, actually, it can get a whole lot better through all of us working together, pulling in the same direction, and never taking no for an answer. We will not stop until every animal is treated with compassion and respect and is able to experience the joy of life.
What a finish. That's terrific. Chris, any final words?
No, just to say how delighted I am with this conversation, and thank you again, Philip, for taking the time to speak to us, and obviously to our members and supporters who will see this this conversation. Mm-hmm. And just to end from me, at least, with the journey continues. I feel like something about a Star Trek Generations here. The journey continues, or will continue to work together in all aspects, whether it's in local, national, regional, European, world, and I won't go into Star Trek Generation and go on to warp speed, but we will work together and continue the vision that I think we all share of making life better for animals. So once again, thank you very much, Philip.
A real pleasure. Thank you both.
I'll resist the temptation on the edit to put a little rolling, scrolling storyline, Star Wars style over the top of that, Chris. Is there anything before we go, Philip, that you would like to add to what we've said, or anything that you'd like to comment on which we haven't touched?
That's very kind of you. I think we've covered so much ground, and it really has been such a pleasurable conversation. I thank you both, and no, I think we've covered it. Unless there's anything more that you would like to touch on.
No, it's been a pleasure for us as well, Philip, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. I could talk to you for a lot longer, but we need to keep things reasonable for our viewers, which is important. Not becoming entirely self-indulgent. No, we're more a rock thing than a jazz thing here. But thank you once again, Philip, and thank you for contributing to our YouTube channel. And we may well have you back in future if you're willing to come.
I would love that. Yeah, thank you so much. Real pleasure. Thank you both. Keep up the wonderful work.
Yeah, well, thank you too. I mean, it's been a pleasure for us. And thank you for watching. That brings to an end this conversation. We will have details of links to CIWF and other organisations at the end of this, so you can have a look at what Philip's doing in those arenas. And we'll see you again on the next YouTube conversation from Catholic Concern for Animals. Thank you very much.